Sometimes we like to tell ourselves a comforting story about disagreements. That when people clash over politics, religion, culture, it's because they don't have the same facts. Someone's misinformed, someone hasn't seen the right charts yet. And if we could just get everyone to access the same information, we would eventually meet in the middle. That story used to feel plausible. In the early 2000s, before social media rewired how we talk to each other, polarization felt quieter, less permanent. Disagreements looked like a temporary bug, not a defining feature of society. Back then, it made sense to believe that more and better information would lead to more agreement. But today, that assumption collapses almost immediately. We live in a world of unprecedented information, infinite access, endless data, and yet we are not converging, we are splintering. The same events, the same evidence, the same facts now push people further apart. So, something else is going on. The real driver of polarization isn't what information we have, it's how that information is interpreted. And more importantly, who we think we are when we interpret it. To understand this, it helps to think in terms of a bubble, not a bubble of ignorance, but a bubble of meaning. Inside this bubble, the world feels coherent, logical, obvious. Beliefs connect neatly, conclusions feel earned. From the inside, your views don't feel biased, they feel true. From the outside, though, that same thinking can look distorted, selective, even irrational. And here is the uncomfortable part. Both perspectives feel equally real for the two opposing sides. This already challenges one of our deepest assumptions about ourselves, the Enlightenment idea that humans are fundamentally rational actors, that we take in information, weight it objectively, and calmly arrive at conclusions. Homo rationalis. If that were true, more information should lead to more agreement. Instead, we see the opposite. Take something like a school shooting in the United States. The same event, the same tragedy. One side says the solution is more guns, the other, fewer. Facts don't settle the debate, they ignite it. Information doesn't dissolve polarization, it accelerates it. Which tells us something crucial. Disagreement isn't happening at the level of facts, it's happening at the level of interpretation. Between objective reality and subjective judgment, there is a gap. And that gap is filled with filters, selective attention, memory distortions, prior beliefs, emotional commitments. People don't respond to reality as it is, they respond to reality as it appears through these filters. That's the bubble. It's not one bias or belief, it's a whole system of psychological mechanisms working together to create a stable, self-reinforcing worldview. This idea isn't new. Plato captured something similar in the allegory of the cave, where the prisoners confuse shadows for reality, not because they are irrational, but because that's the only thing that they ever seen in their life. I'm not saying that we are living in fantasy worlds, but our access to reality is always indirect. The bubble is the lens through which we see the world. And most of the time, we don't even know that we are trapped inside. The bubble doesn't invent an alternative reality, it determines how reality is accessed and which parts of it feel relevant, threatening, or ignorable. The real question isn't whether distortions exist, they clearly do. The question is how the bubble keeps itself intact. One of the strongest forces holding the bubble together is the need to avoid cognitive dissonance. This idea comes from the psychologist Leon Feuchtinger, who introduced it in his 1957 book, A Theory of Cognitive Dissonance. Feuchtinger argued that humans are driven by a deep need for internal consistency. When our beliefs, values, or identity clash with new information, it creates a psychological discomfort, what he called dissonance. And here's the crucial insight. Reducing that discomfort does not require getting closer to the truth. More often, it means rejecting the information, reinterpreting it, or questioning the credibility of its source. Inside a bubble, contradictory information doesn't arrive as neutral data. It arrives as a threat to coherence, to identity, to the story a person tells about who they are. So the mind instinctively moves to neutralize it. The bubble filters, softens, or blocks whatever it might destabilize it. Importantly, this isn't ignorance or stupidity. It's a basic feature of human psychology. It helps maintain mental stability, but it also explains why exposure to opposing views so often backfire. Still, this only gets us halfway. Avoiding discomfort explains why people resist new information, but not why their thinking continues to feel rational, balanced, and well reasoned. To understand that, we need to take a look at motivated reasoning. In the 90s, psychologist Ziva Kunda showed that reasoning is rarely neutral. In her influential work on motivated reasoning, she demonstrated that people don't abandon logic. When their beliefs are challenged, they deploy it selectively. Arguments supporting preferred conclusions are scrutinized lightly. Arguments that threaten them are scrutinized aggressively. Reasoning, in other words, is less guided by the pursuit of truth than by the motivation to protect existing beliefs and identities. This creates a powerful feedback loop. Core beliefs shape which arguments feel convincing, and those arguments then reinforce the beliefs that produced them. From the inside, the process feels rational. From the outside, it looks biased. The bubble defines what counts as good evidence, sound logic, and reasonable conclusions. And all of this happens largely outside of conscious awareness. Motivated reasoning doesn't require dishonesty. People sincerely experience their conclusions as logical and justified. That's what makes it so effective and scary. It preserves both internal coherence and a positive self-image as a rational thinker. Over time, the system is reinforced by confirmation bias. Psychologist Raymond S. Nickerson described confirmation bias as the tendency to seek out, interpret, and remember information that is supporting existing beliefs, by discouraging or forgetting information that challenges them. This bias doesn't just affect what information people seek. It affects how they remember it. Studies show that supporting evidence is recalled more vividly, while contradictory ones fade or are distorted in memory. The informational environment inside a bubble slowly becomes more uniform. This is how bubbles turn into echo chambers. Certain sources are trusted, shared, and revisited. Others are dismissed or excluded entirely. Counter-arguments doesn't disappear, but they appear in weakened or caricatured forms. Over time, alternative interpretations stop being legitimate at all. And once this process extends beyond the individual, it becomes social. According to social identity theory, developed by Henry Touchful and John Turner, a large part of our identity comes from group membership. As identification with a group strengthens, distinction between us and them harden. In-group favoritism increases, out-group views are seen as uniform, misguided, or dangerous. At this point, the bubble becomes collective. It stops being just a psychological filter and becomes a shared framework, complete with common narratives, norms, and rules of interpretation. Agreement is rewarded. Dissent is discouraged. Information flows through group-based filters, shaped by identity and loyalty. When collective bubbles collide, communication breaks down. Groups aren't merely disagreeing over conclusions, they're operating within different interpretations of reality. This is how individual cognitive biases scale into societal-level polarization. Seen this way, polarization isn't a bug caused by bad information or broken platforms. It's a predictable outcome of how human cognition and identity interact. The bubble feels invisible from the inside because it's doing exactly what it was evolved to do: preserve coherence, protect identity, and maintain a sense of rational selfhood. It explains why disagreement feels personal, why facts can feel threatening, and why more information doesn't necessarily bring us closer together. Social media didn't invent these dynamics, but it made them easier to scale. It rewards identity alignment, amplifies group narratives, and lowers the cost of living inside closed informational walls. Individual bubbles become collective, and once that happens, polarization stops being a debate problem and becomes a structural one. This also explains the paradox of our moment. We have more information than any other generation in history, yet less shared understanding. Not because reality has fractured, but because our interpretations of it have. The uncomfortable implication is that no amount of fact-checking alone can solve this. If disagreements live at level of identity, then persuasion can start with information. It has to start with awareness. Awareness that we are all living inside bubbles. Awareness that our certainty often feels stronger than our access to reality. Awareness that the line between rational thinking and identity protection is thinner than we would like to believe. The bubble isn't something other people are trapped in. It's something we are all carrying with us, quietly shaping how the world makes sense. And the first step towards understanding polarization isn't popping the bubble. It's realizing that you are inside one.